Hey folks, I thought I'd do a quick video on some unusual sources for copper, brass, and other semi-precious metals, or whatever you want to call them. Copper is now considered a precious metal, apparently. I guess it's going up in value enough. So, I'm being trolled by my computer here. Anyway, so when I'm out picking, for example, I tend to watch for ground cable, and that's a thick cable about the size of your pinky, maybe even the size of your finger, that is used on lightning rods on barns and such. So you can imagine a strand of cable from across the roof of a barn and then down the side of a barn, and a lot of times when that's taken off, it's coiled up and it's thrown in a corner, so, or in the scrap pile. So you might want to watch for that and buy it. It's also good because it's braided. It's also good for crafts, making bracelets and other artwork and such. So it's in demand for artists and such as well, if you don't want to just scrap it. And yeah, so you'll be looking for a patented coil of wire. Usually it'll be brown, or almost, in some cases I've seen almost black. Sometimes with paint all over it if the barn's been painted, so it'll be painted red on one side. So watch for that. You can get a pretty good sum for a coil of that kind of copper, and probably if the farmer's not looking for scrap himself, it could probably be had for pittance compared to its actual value. And just regular ground cables, good stuff as well. So it's about pinky size. A little thinner than lightning rod cable, but well worth picking up. And lightning rods themselves are obviously copper, but you don't want to be scrapping them because they do have value. But if they're broken ones, you might as well pick them up anyway, because you can still scrap them. And then sell the components, the parts, the points, the stand, the balls, etc. Another thing is, when you're buying in bulk in auction, you tend to get a lot of other junk with your purchase. That one item you're after, that you're paying for in a lot, that you take out of the lot, that's great, you've got it, but you're leaving money on the table if you're giving away or throwing out stuff like this, or this, or this. They're all, in this case, they're broken, or they're just not really a saleable item. Not for me anyway. I don't know if you've had luck selling worn out copper dishes and stuff. Silver plated copper as well. Some yards pay a lesser price for it, but the yard I sell to pays the same as clean copper, because it's just a thin coat of silver, really. Anyway, you can watch for that. So you get silver plate that is not worth anything, or maybe it's good for artwork or something, but if it says EPC or EP copper or EPB or EP brass, if it says EPBM, it's electroplate on base metal, which odds are if you stick a magnet to it, it'll be steel, so the magnet will stick. If it doesn't stick, it's copper or brass, more than likely. Sometimes it'll be Britannia metal, which is a white metal, basically zinc, I suspect. So anyway, yeah, so basically that little pile, for example, that I showed you, and including a piece of a socket of a Mogul socket lamp, these sockets end up wearing out or getting broken, so I take the copper chunk out of it. Well worth you doing. That little pile itself is worth oh, I guess about $3 and some cents. So if you're throwing them out or giving them away, you're giving away $3 to whoever, or to the garbage. And if you can just throw it all in a box and eventually take it to the scrapyard, you're going to get a little extra bonus. And you just have to make sure there's no other metals on it. Like in this case, I got to take off a piece of brass off this copper piece, but it's not a big deal. Usually if it's a copper plate or silver plated copper, it may have lead included in the decoration or handles or that sort of thing, so you might have to break those off, or they'll discount a little bit of weight for that contamination. But if you get a big copper platter that's about this big, you're still looking at or silver plated copper platter, you're probably still looking at $5, $10, $15 worth of scrap, depending upon how big and how thick, etc. Now, copper was up to a point where it was enough that I could buy stuff from thrift shops at 50 cents a quarter or whatever and still be making money on the copper. It's a dollar or two. It's not a lot, but if you're there anyway, why not? So, and it's easy to deal with. You just throw it in a pile. So, yeah, there's a lot of alternate sources for some extra income on the back end of your junk that you've acquired from picking and antiques buying from bulk farm sales and auctions and such. That box of silver plate, if it's all EP on copper and you pick it up for $2, there might be $20, $30, $40 in scrap. So, well worth picking up. So, yeah, there's other sources as well. You could be picking up batteries, like car batteries and that sort of thing when you're picking and doing that, because you're coming across them in those sheds and they're just sitting there, and maybe the farmer will want to sell them. So find out what the your local yard is paying for batteries, and then pay accordingly to whatever amount you need to pay for them to be able to haul them, etc. But beware, technically you need a hazardous goods placard to be hauling batteries, so just be careful. And they do have acid in them and such, so handling them is a bit of a pain at times, especially if they're cracked or broken. And before I forget, stuff like this East Indian brass, I generally find it doesn't sell very well. So you get solid brass animals and ornaments such as this that just don't have any value, especially if you've got to polish them and they're all grungy. There's just no value in them. But there's good scrap value in the brass. So it's still well worth stockpiling this stuff and scrapping it at the scrapyard. And old lamps that you're tearing apart for parts and components, watch for components that are brass or even aluminum. In this case, it's just a gold plated or a gold flashed piece of aluminum. So you can throw that in a separate pile and get extruded aluminum price for it. So a few extra bucks here and there doesn't hurt. Just a few bonuses for you, and yeah, happy scrapping, happy picking, safe picking. Take care.